I spent months researching hidden genocides, 262 years of documented atrocities against Turkic peoples, 3.4 to 5.8 million deaths, and I kept hitting the same wall. Every time I presented evidence from Turkish sources, academic journals published in Türkiye, or Muslim historians documenting their own people's suffering, I got the same response. That's biased. Do you have Western sources? Think about what this means. The Circassian genocide killed 95% of an entire population between 1763 and 1864. Over 1 million people. The survivors fled to Türkiye. So naturally, the most detailed documentation exists in Turkish archives. Survivor testimonies recorded in Turkish. Academic research by Turkish historians. Circassian community records preserved in Türkiye. But according to Western AI systems, these sources are automatically suspect. Potentially biased. Need verification. Do you have British or American sources confirming this? Here's the absurdity. Russia committed the genocide. Britain and France were Russia's geopolitical rivals, but didn't intervene. Why would they extensively document Russian crimes they ignored while they happened? The Kazakh famine of 1930 to 1933. Soviet policies killed 1.3 to 2.3 million Kazakhs, 38 to 42% of the entire population. Kazakhs became a minority in their own land. The most detailed records? Kazakh oral histories. Soviet documents later declassified. Research by Kazakh and Turkish scholars studying Turkic peoples, all flagged as requiring Western verification. When ISIS massacred Iraqi Turkmen in 2014, abducted 1,300 people, and used 600 women as sex slaves, who documented it? The Iraqi Turkmen Front. Human rights organizations in Türkiye, Turkmen survivors. The Iraqi parliament recognized it as genocide in 2017. The UN recognized the sexual slavery in 2018. But when I cite Turkmen sources documenting their own genocide, I'm told they're not credible enough. The Uyghurgenocide. Right now, over 1 million people in camps, leaked Chinese government documents, satellite imagery, survivor testimony, international recognition by multiple countries. But significant documentation comes from Uyghur exile organizations, Turkish researchers, and Muslim human rights groups. And yes, I was told these need independent Western verification before being fully credible. Here's the pattern. When a genocide happens, the survivors flee. They preserve their history. They document their trauma. They research what happened to their people. And then they're told their testimony doesn't count because they're too close to it. Imagine if we applied this standard to the Holocaust. Well, this testimony comes from a Jewish survivor, so we need German sources to verify it. This research was conducted by Israeli historians, so it's potentially biased. It sounds absurd because it is absurd. But this is exactly the standard applied to Turkish and Muslim sources documenting genocides against their own peoples. The Crimean Tatar deportation, May 18, 1944. 191,044 people forcibly removed from their homeland by the NKVD. Up to 46% died in the first 2 years. Soviet documents confirm this. But the most detailed accounts? Crimean Tatar survivors, their descendants, Turkish researchers who studied the deportations. And yes, these are questioned more heavily than Soviet sources that minimized the death toll. The Meskhetian Turks, also known as Ahuska Turks. Deported November 15, 1944, 115,000 people, never charged with any crime. 40,000 had fought for the Soviet Union. 26,000 died fighting Nazis. Deported anyway. Up to 50,000 died. Who preserved this history? Meskhetian Turkish communities in exile, researchers in Türkiye, Muslim scholars. Their sources are treated with more skepticism than the Soviet government that committed the crime and tried to erase them. This is information warfare disguised as objectivity. The perpetrators write the first draft of history. The survivors write the truth. And then we're told the survivors are less reliable than the killers. When Lord Curzon warned at the 1920 Paris Peace Conference about the destruction of 300 Azerbaijani villages in Zangezur and the massacre of 4,000 Tatars, that was documented in Western diplomatic records. So it's credible. But when Turkish and Azerbaijani historians provide detailed documentation of the same events, with names of villages, dates of massacres, survivor testimony, suddenly we need multiple sources and Western verification. The Greek War of Independence. The slogan was explicit: "Not a Turk shall remain in the Morea." The Tripolitsa massacre killed over 10,000 people in 3 days. Women and children tortured before death. Western historians documented this because it happened in Europe and involved European Christians. But when similar massacres happened to Turks in areas without Western observers, Turkish sources become potentially exaggerated. By 1822, the Turkish, Muslim, Albanian, and Jewish populations of the Peloponnese had ceased to exist as settled communities. That's documented demographic erasure. But mentioning it makes you pro-Turkish. Here's what I learned. The absence of Western sources documenting a genocide doesn't mean it didn't happen. It means Western powers weren't paying attention, didn't care, or were complicit. The Circassian genocide happened over 101 years. Russia was expanding. Britain and France were focused on their own colonial projects. The Ottomans documented it, but they were the sick man of Europe. Nobody cared what they said. So the most comprehensive records exist in Turkish archives, Circassian oral histories preserved by survivors in Türkiye, and later research by Turkic scholars. And that's treated as less reliable than the near silence from Western powers who watched it happen. This isn't about blind trust in any source. Turkish sources can be biased. So can Russian sources. So can British sources. So can American sources. Every source has perspective and agenda. But automatically giving Western sources higher credibility when documenting genocides against non-Western peoples is itself a form of bias. It privileges the perspective of those who often weren't there, didn't intervene, and sometimes benefited from the violence. When Ukraine recognized the Circassian genocide on January 9, 2025, it made headlines. When Turkish historians had been documenting it for decades, it was dismissed as nationalism. The pattern is clear. Genocides against Turkic peoples are questioned harder, require more proof, and are taken less seriously than genocides against European peoples. The sources documenting them are scrutinized more heavily. This creates a perfect system for historical erasure. Commit genocide against a population. Ensure Western powers don't document it extensively. Then, when survivors document it themselves, dismiss their sources as biased. And if you question this system, you're told you're being emotional, politicizing history, or pushing an agenda, as if insisting that Turkish and Muslim sources deserve equal consideration is somehow radical. I'm not saying uncritically accept everything. I'm saying apply the same standard of critical evaluation to all sources. Western, Turkish, Russian, Chinese, Arab, all deserve the same level of scrutiny and the same benefit of the doubt. When 1 to 1.8 million Uyghur are in camps right now, and Uyghur exile organizations provide documentation, and Turkish researchers compile evidence, we don't have time for, but are your sources Western enough? The systematic targeting of Turkic peoples over 262 years is documented in Soviet archives, Ottoman records, Turkish research, Kazakh oral histories, Uyghur testimony, Crimean Tatar survivor accounts, and yes, Western diplomatic documents when they bothered to pay attention. Dismissing non-Western sources isn't objectivity. It's complicity in the ongoing erasure of these genocides from historical consciousness. This part documents how the gatekeeping of information sources itself becomes a tool of historical denial. Stay tuned for the series documenting the genocides. If you found this valuable, watch the full series. share it. Because these hidden genocides stay hidden partly because we've been trained to dismiss the sources that document them. That ends now.